you will never be in an environment like you are as an undergrad again. Surrounded by amazing people, all who have a common. You've got something in common with them, and there's kind of a brotherhood and a sisterhood. Invest in those people. Get to know those people and build relationships.
Hi, everyone. It's Dean.
And it's B. We're here to help you build your commercial real estate network so you can get your foot in the door and design the career of your dreams.
We interview leaders in commercial real estate and hear their stories of failure, triumph, basic survival, and hard-won wisdom.
It's like having coffee with the real estate pro.
You're listening to How I Got My Job.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of How I Got My Job. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Mike O'Malley, who is the Executive Director and Interim Faculty Director at the Fitzgerald Institute for Real Estate, focusing on external industry engagement. He is also an Associate Professor of the practice at Notre Dame, teaching real estate and private equity. Previously, Mike was a senior principal at Pennybacker Capital, where he served as COO, CFO, and CCO, leading capital formation and investor relations. During his 15-year tenure, Pennybacker grew into a $3 billion multi-strategy firm. He holds degrees from Notre Dame and an MBA from the University of Texas. Enjoy the conversation.
All right. Welcome back to How I Got My Job, a Coffee Connectors podcast. We're fired up today to have Mike O'Malley on, who I've been hearing about for years. Mike, I think we first spoke years and years ago when we were connected by Park Madison. But Rob Cohn has been speaking your praises for years and years, and it's exciting to finally be here on a podcast where we can ask you deep and probing questions about your life and put you on the spot. I can see your face getting red there.
Exactly.
Already. No, we're really excited to have you on. And I think, Mike's career is really interesting, I think, for a lot of the students here, because you've started out in one field, went into tech, have been in real estate, have been in academia, and really hearing that story on how you made those transitions through your life, I think is going to be especially important for our listeners. And then you are in the thick of it right now, teaching college students, and our clientele, our listeners, are college students trying to figure out how to get into real estate. So better than anyone that we speak to about that transition from college into the industry. So with that, we can sort of start out maybe in the beginning, Mike. Sort of, you came out as a young boy. Where'd you live? What are your origins? How'd you get to college? And kick us off with a little bit of your history.
Absolutely. And Dean and B, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be on here. I've watched some of your other podcasts, and it's pretty esteemed company that I probably don't deserve to be with, but I'll give it my best. So look, I grew up in the Midwest, grew up in Kansas, suburban Kansas City. Mom and dad were entrepreneurs. They started a business when I was young that really helped people go through career transitions, like mid-career. So someone was an engineer and realized that they didn't want to be an engineer. They'd work with my parents. They'd put them through a series of different, tests and things like Myers-Briggs, and ultimately help them decide where they wanted to go. And so, from a very young age, growing up in Kansas, I always knew that I was going to go into business. That I was good with numbers. I had a fascination with working and then getting compensated for it, and so I was always trying to start businesses or sell baseball cards, whatever it was. And I knew I wanted to go into business, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. To be honest with you, I came out of high school and went to college in the early 90s. And, there was a massive recession going on. And I think because of my parents working with a lot of clients who were, leaving their jobs, some voluntarily and some non-voluntarily, they always said, who never gets fired is accountants. You need to go and be an accountant and be go work at the time it was Big 8 and then Big 6 accounting firm. And so that was kind of my marching orders. My brother did that. It seemed to work. So I, I came to University of Notre Dame, and from day one, I knew that I wanted to be an accounting major. It wasn't too far into my sophomore year that I realized I really didn't like accounting that much. But I was that deep, and I kind of had a plan, and so I went with it, and ultimately graduated with a degree in accounting, and then one in computer applications. And so that was kind of it's not that exciting of a path, but it was a path that never wavered, at least until that point in my life.
So, Mike, I think this is the best part of your story for me because it just starts your career of pivots, and we'll talk about what that means later on. But you knew you didn't like accounting, but you stuck the path anyway, which is fine. And I believe that the fact that you had parents who were entrepreneurs, it didn't really scare you because you knew it. You didn't have to stay there, right?
Hmm.
So, talk to us about what happened next.
Yeah. So what happened next is I did an internship with a big six accounting firm. Didn't enjoy it, and then promptly accepted an offer to go work there full time. Spent 2 years of not enjoying being an auditor, and my first pivot was not a big one, but to flip to doing something a little bit more exciting. As an auditor, I just didn't really you didn't really own anything. If you did everything right, nobody would know you were there, kind of thing, and that just didn't seem very fulfilling. So I moved to doing bankruptcy restructurings and helping companies, in and out of bankruptcy, in and out of court bankruptcy restructurings. What was interesting about that is there was action. There was something going on, or else they didn't need us there. And so was able to work with a lot of different clients around the world and get involved in some pretty cool proceedings with the types of companies that you've heard of that were either in consumer products or restaurants. And so it was a little bit more tangible. I did that for 2 years and kind of had the same issue is that after I finished an engagement, you just went on to the next one. And, the next Monday you got on a plane going to a different city than the previous Monday. And at no point was I really working to build something besides a knowledge base for myself. And that was really kind of frustrating because, that by that time I was in my mid 20s, working hard and adding a lot of skills, but feeling like I wasn't really producing any long term product or benefit for myself.
Mike, I'd be curious just to dig in a little bit more on that because you're teaching a lot of college students now in your position as a professor at Notre Dame. Um, what do you recommend to students as they're trying to figure out their path? So if you have students that are in accounting, is
Hmm.
it valuable to see that through a couple of years and gain some of those skill sets, even though it may not be perfect and just sort of finding your job? Or should you be really trying to find your passion while you're in college? And you were accounting too, right? So, it's a common story, but I've always looked at it and looked at folks like you like that's a great skill set to have and that you're able to leverage those positions, and having at least a couple years at an accounting firm allowed you to bring a set of skills and tools to your other endeavors.
Yeah, it's a great question, Dean. And I always kind of split this question in two, and you kind of answered part of it. There's your skill set that you're building. And, I knew that I wasn't going to be an accountant for my career, but I knew that the accounting skill set was really important and very useful. And so I knew I wanted to build that. But what I tell students is build your skill set, but pursue your passion. And your passion and your skill set can be two totally different things. And so, I talk to a lot of students who say, all my friends are going this route, but I don't know if I want to go that route because I don't enjoy that. I'm like, well, I can tell you very clearly, if you don't enjoy it now, you're not going to enjoy it later. And so pursue your passion. And oftentimes, what I believe is following your passion is a couple of things. It's doing the type of work you want to be doing with the people you want to be working with. You don't work for the brand name on the building. You work for the vice president or the managing
Mhm.
director or maybe the founder. And I would much rather work for a firm that maybe no one that you've talked to has heard of, but is led by a great entrepreneur that, likes to train his team in a way and give them access that, you're not going to get by going to a bulge bracket firm where you're, 12th man on the deal team. And so if you can separate that and pursue your passion on what you want to do and work for people that you want to work with, I believe that leads to far better outcomes than just going and putting in your 2 years at a large firm. Doesn't mean that that's a bad option. To me, that's kind of delaying. Like a lot of people who go
Hmm.
into investment banking, they don't vision themselves doing investment banking for 35 years. But to
Right.
them, it opens up a lot of doors, and it does. But if you already know what your passion is, I don't think you need to spend those 2 years, going to the accounting firm or the investment banking firm or the traditional jobs that are out there. Many of them have great training programs, but so does working for an entrepreneur that can teach you how to be, how to build a business, how to truly underwrite an asset, or ultimately, you know, start a firm and launch a fund. To me, that's where you get the most learning.
And Mike, you're speaking from experience because your next pivot was an amazing one during the internet boom. And
Yeah.
I want you to tell the students, like, you went through four different companies during that time. Talk about a little bit about what you did and then why you did that and what caused you to make those changes so rapidly.
Yeah. So I spent, 2 years as an auditor, 2 years doing restructuring. Um, it was total luck. I was on a project in Austin, Texas. At the time, I was living in Chicago, and I couldn't fly back to Chicago on Friday because O'Hare was snowed in, and so I had to spend a December day weekend in Austin where it was 80 degrees. Internet 1.0 was taking off. There was a startup in Austin called Dell Computers that seemed to be a big deal. And there was just all this optimism in this town, and it was alive and vibrant. And Sunday night, I'm like, what am I doing? I need to be a part of this.
Right.
And even the client that I was working with, that was going through a difficult time, everyone there had, whether it be stock options or some sort of participation in the success of the company. And so I kind of made up my mind right there. I've got to make a change and I got to come here and figure it out. So reached out to a friend, was able to secure an opportunity at a company that was, I think it was Fortune voted them like the number 3 tech company to work for in America. So I figured that was a good option, and moved down to Austin. Didn't know a person, but it was my chance to go from being client service and kind of a third party provider to try to be a part of something and grow something that I could have an element of ownership in, even if it was um, you know stock options that ultimately may or may not be valuable. I spent 7 weeks at that first company before I realized they did business a little bit differently than what I was used to, and I just said, this isn't a great fit for me. And I was naive enough to just resign. I had no network in Austin. I'd been there for 2 months, but I was kind of confident that something else will come up. This is there's so much venture capital coming into the space, et cetera. A social contact that I'd made at the first company said, "You need to come and work with me. We're venture funded. They had an early cloud computing idea that they were driving. So I did. I came and I led their business development, and we went out to try to raise more venture capital money. The gentleman who recruited me over to that firm, I'm kind of going ahead. He became my partner at Pennybacker. Tim Berry, who's the founder of Pennybacker, but at the time,
Hmm.
he was just a guy I knew, and he said, "Come on, let's try this." And so that company, I think we were too early for the idea. We were able to return the money to our investors. And then I went to the fourth job I held in the year 2000, which was a B2B software company that was funded by some large industry players, and I ended up staying there for 8 years. But yeah, the year 2000 was probably the toughest year of taxes I ever did because I had so many W-2s from bouncing around.
I can imagine. Mike, as we're going back to our listeners here, I think two things resonate and wanted to get your take on them. A lot of our listeners are first gen, they're not coming in with a lot of capital necessarily
Mhm.
when they graduate. And so a lot of them have asked, hey, does it make sense for me to move someplace different that could be exciting if I don't have a huge network, but I've got my family and everything here? Is that too risky? And then I think the second thing that comes up is and B, you and I have talked about this with students, is do they feel like they can fail and still fail forward, I guess is
Hmm.
the term they're using in politics, but use that as a chance to get contacts, experience, and move forward. And I'm curious what you tell students in similar situations in your program.
Yeah, they're two great points that you bring up, and so I'll address them both. Let's start with the failing item first. I think the reality is your first 2 to 3 years of your career, it's really learning. Folks don't bring you on to source the next deal or come up with an algorithm that ultimately can make the firm money if you're at a hedge fund. You're there to learn, you're there to contribute and be a part of the firm, and then eventually, if you are good at picking up those skills, then you become a real asset to any firm. Doesn't mean your work is not important in the first couple of years, but it also means you are there to learn. And so sometimes I think people put too much emphasis on those first few years. And what I always tell folks is you kind of get a do-over a little bit. How are you supposed to possibly know which firm is the right firm to go to early on in your career? Or, maybe you go to an oil and gas firm, but, ultimately your passion's in real estate. You don't know that at that age. But and so it's all about how you handle yourself, but it's okay to fail, if you will. I mean, I failed 3 times in 1 year, and it was some of the best things that happened to me because it also helped me get over that fear of failure. And in an environment like Austin, like, there's not many people who have been in Austin for 25 years that don't have a couple of tombstones of startups or worthless stock options on their wall. That's kind of the culture. Um, and it's similar, when you get into an investment firm, 99 deals of the 100 that you are going to look at aren't going to make. And so getting comfortable with investing time and then saying, you know what, this isn't the best thing. That's a great skill to learn early on, in my opinion, versus going and working somewhere that you don't want to be at, but you're spending 3,000 hours or 3,500 hours. You're not failing, but you're also not growing. And I think that can change your mindset a little bit too. And then the part on capital, um, and like, where to live and where to work. It's the refrain, but in my view, relationships are everything. Relationships are so powerful. And if you really look at how most people progressed in their career, it wasn't because they were really good on Excel and other people noticed it and, saw, wow, he formats or she formats that well or has a cool formula. It's the relationships you build and it's how you communicate and being able to work with people together. And so, I tell folks, you don't expect to save a lot of money in your first 3 years in the industry. And I had student loans, like you're going to be paying those off, and it's not easy, but you're going to be able to do it. There's plenty of people that if you're listening to this podcast, you're in a much better spot than probably 90% of the population. You are a college student, you are getting a degree from a good school. It is going to be tough, but then you're putting in that work to get to the next element. And so don't be scared of failure on that too. Like going to a different market is pretty, it can be tough. You're away from your family, you don't have a safety net. You're building your own relationships. You don't have maybe family relationships or a brother and sister, but this is a opportunity to go out on your own. Set your expectations that you're not going to get rich off of your first couple of years salary. Um, and with that, I think with that mindset, you are able to approach these challenges a little bit differently and with a little bit more confidence.
And Mike, I think it's such a great point because being a first generation student, a lot of times students are expected to be the one to make the money immediately to
Hmm.
help the family. And it's such an important concept to take in, and it's hard to take in, but you must take it in order to be successful. And I'm saying this as a first generation student who said, "Listen," and I made that hard decision, like I am not going to make it and make this huge job and stick around at this one job for a long time because I kind of need to move around in order to be successful. And I'm on the way there, right? And I'm doing really well. But I only did that because I had to make those hard decisions to say, hey, family, I can't help you right now because I have to help me. And
Hmm.
sometimes that does mean I need to leave the state. and I won't be able to contribute financially, but you guys are going to be okay. And be okay in saying that. And I just want to just say it clearly out there because it's such a hard thing to do. But Mike's story to me shows you a really good example as to why it's important to do that.
Yeah, I've got kind of 2 points to support what you just said, B. So at Notre Dame, over 20% of our students that were have been admitted in the last 2 years are either first generation college or Pell Grant recipients. So household income, I believe it's below $80,000. So 1 in 5 students are in that position. And one, you're coming and you're competing against people who, maybe their family has been on Wall Street for generations and they come in with a whole different knowledge base. And I have a lot of conversations with students in that, that are the first generation. And I say, I would rather be in your position than their position. You might think they have all the answers, but you're making real change, not only for yourself, but for your family. And so I've got some great stories, but we take students on treks to go visit different firms. We will do one to Boston at some point, and I will and I will get you guys on the list. But we were at New York. We were in New York a couple of years ago. First generation student. And we went to one of the largest investment banks in America. Student didn't know anything about them. Absolutely wowed them during a Q&A session. So if you're the student doing the Q&A and you wow the presenters, got an internship, did an amazing job, got hired full time. Student gets there full time, calls me about 3 months later and says, okay, now it's time for you to tell me who's the next one of me. And I need to recruit that person. And that's the opportunity not only to change your family's trajectory and your personal trajectory, but then give back to others and build that and kind of even out the playing field. So now, we've got folks at these firms that are looking for
Mm-hmm.
the person that has to do it themselves, which,
Mhm.
as you know very well, B, it's tough. You got a lot of questions that you can't ask your mom or your dad about because they don't have experience in that, on investment management or real estate or investment banking or whatever it might be.
So, Mike, thank you for just doubling down because it's such an important lesson for first generation students to learn, but also to execute. But let's continue with your story because there's so much more to learn. So now you're at the point where you're at this internet company, tech company for quite some
Mhm.
time, and you're at a position where you're a successor. You can become a successor to become the CEO. You make a huge decision that most people wouldn't make. And this is the story of your life. Mike, talk about it a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah. So I ended up at software company number three, and at a very young age, I was 26. I was employee number five, and very quickly employees one, two, and three are gone. And so I had the opportunity to step into like a larger role as their CFO and COO at a young age, and I was clueless, but I kind of figured it out. Was really busy for kind of 4 years in helping to build this company, and all the while I'm watching my friends that I went to undergrad with now start to go to business school and start to graduate and come out with different jobs, and kind of saying, wow, maybe I'm going down the wrong path. They seem to be in a different spot and going in the right direction. So I sat down with a mentor of mine who was the CEO at the time, and he said, look, Mike, I believe in you. I'm investing in you. What is it that you want? And I'm like, I want to be a better manager. I want to get my MBA as well because I don't really know what I'm doing and I haven't had a lot of training. And so he said, fine, we'll pay for you to go get your MBA. And so I did that while I was working. I did an executive program, and it was incredibly valuable. Graduated that. The CEO at the time said, look, I've got a second career arc that I want to pursue, which has nothing to do with business. And I want you to be my successor. And so it's not guaranteed, but we're going to go down this path together. And when I leave, I'd love for you to step in. So I said, okay. There's only one problem: is I didn't really enjoy the industry. It was a very niche industry, and it was software. And I'm not an engineer, and so at the end of the day, I got pretty knowledgeable about software. But as soon as the engineers wanted to like speak a different language, they could totally tune me out by going deep into, and that just wasn't it wasn't interesting to me. And so I was at a pivotal age of about 33 or 34. It was at that time that the gentleman that I mentioned, Tim Berry, who I worked with at software company number two, reached out to me out of the blue. We hadn't talked in a couple of years, and he said, "Hey, I've had some success building a real estate development company. Um, that company built single tenant net lease properties for high growth publicly traded retailers like Starbucks and Chase Bank and CVS and some of the different restaurants." And he said, "I'd like you to sit on my advisory board, and we need to find a better capital source." I had no idea what I was doing. I had no experience in real estate. I did know about capitalizing companies. I'd brought in a number of investors, and so I said, "Yeah, I'd be happy to help you out." And so spent a little time with him, going to talk to some of the different real estate private equity firms on the East and West Coast. And what we quickly realized, Tim came from the same background as I did, at a big four firm. He actually did restructuring, where you're kind of classically trained. We're like, man, like if you're going for a big check, there's firms out there that can bring research and analytics and data, even in early 2000s. But in that middle market space, what we were seeing is we meet with firms. They're like, yeah, if we like your project, we'll write you a check, and then we'd say, well, then what? And then they're like, well, then we'll hand you over to a 23-year-old analyst, and they'll compare your budget to actual every month, and that'll be that. And we're like, man, that doesn't seem right. Like, what about actually bringing some value to your to your portfolio companies or the investments, and bring higher level analytics and research and process and helping to institutionalize them? No one was doing it. And so it was at that time that Tim decided to start our firm, which became Pennybacker Capital. And he reached out to a couple of people, including myself, and said, I'm going to start this firm, and I want you to be my partner. And at first I said no. I said, I got a pretty good thing going, and I'm working off, they paid for my MBA. I'm working off. And then Tim came back to me, and he said, this is the last chance. We're going to start this. We've got this opportunity. And, it was always my desire to be kind of in control of my own destiny. And
Mm-hmm.
I never used the word work for myself, because I never wanted to work for myself. I always wanted to be part of a partnership, but I did want to be in control of the destiny, and build something that, one, I had some sort of ownership of, both true ownership, but also that I felt was valuable to me. And here was an opportunity to start an investment management firm in real estate, which I didn't know anything about, but something that I could be proud of, and that I thought I had some skills that could benefit the firm. So I kind of took a flyer, and I just, let's see, my wife and I had just bought a house, and interest rates were like 9% or whatever. So I decided to leave that job, go work for a 70% discount.
Yeah.
The day after I quit my job, is when Lehman Brothers kind of started, or Bear Stearns. And so watched our whatever savings we have go in half. And we were in business. We raised a $29,285,000 fund. Um, two of the four partners with no real estate experience previously.
Wow. Wow. A lot of that resonates, and there's a lot to unpack there. Like, one thing I want to go back to, and I definitely want to get into the story of starting Pennybacker, because it's a great story. But we get the question all the time about whether graduate school, business school, law school is a value add or is not, and whether you have to really care about what you're doing if you are going into that beforehand or not. Is that really a true reset? And would love to get your thoughts on that experience, and whether it was worth it, and is it worth it to go 2 years out and work. My business partner Greg did it while he was working. I went to law school and public policy school for 4 years and was out of the
Hmm.
market. There's a lot of different ways to look at it.
Yeah, yeah. I think you said it right, Dean. For people who want to make a career change, and I'm speaking about MBA, it is an incredible reset. Um, I teach a lot of MBA students, and I had a student 2 years ago who, she was a third grade religion teacher, and she came to get her MBA, and literally the day she showed up, she said, I'm now a consultant. That's what I want to go for. By the fourth week of the semester, she had secured a job, an internship with one of the big three consulting firms. And like in a matter of a month, she just totally rebranded herself. She'd only taken like 3 weeks of classes at that point in time. She had a great internship and ended up going there full time. So if you're truly doing a reset, graduate school is a fantastic time because you can really kind of reinvent yourself. And it's neat to say. I've got students who are maybe they were sales and trading and they wanted to go into investment banking, or some want to go into the investment side, and they came from a leadership training program at Toyota or something, and they want to get it. So it's a great reset, but is it necessary? Absolutely not. I think about when we hire folks. When I was at Pennybacker, we were looking for people that we thought would fit with the culture, that we thought were gifted in a multitude of ways, and it didn't just have to be analytically gifted, but and that would be trainable to how we look at real estate and how we evaluate things. And an MBA doesn't do that. Those are it can certainly help mature you and help to open your eyes, but I don't think it's needed unless you want to do a reset, or like in my case, I truly wanted to understand how to manage people better and work in teams better. And so for me, it was helpful to be able to take those classes um, while I was still working, because I didn't want to give up 2 years either. Because you can do the NPV of that, and it's not insignificant. Um, so an MBA can be very valuable, but it's not necessary in my opinion. Law school, or a traditional graduate degree, maybe in a science or in something that's public policy or more specialized. I don't have a lot of experience, but like I always say, if you're going to go to law school, you at least better be interested in the law, or have an idea that you want to at least start your career with that, because there's not a whole lot of off roads right
Yeah.
out of law school, but to go into the law.
That's great. And then, Mike, wanted to sort of touch on this transition to Pennybacker, right?
Yep.
And I think as a lot of people are mapping out their careers, there's that period of time for a lot of people, it occurs late 20s to mid 30s when you start having real responsibilities. You might own a house, you might have family responsibilities, you might have kids, and that's a lot of the time period when these opportunities arise. I mean, I had a very similar experience. I sold my house to start the company, Northbridge. But I'm curious how you think about those risks. Are those, as you're becoming more established, how do you give yourself the opportunity to position yourself in good places? Because school debt can often be crippling. I had a lot
Yeah.
of debt, so it's a scary period of time, but that's often the time when you're really trying to take a leap in your career, and you're faced with the same challenges maybe right out of college, but it's all over again because you're a little bit more established and it can feel like more is on the line.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to answer this a couple of different ways. First of all, when I had the opportunity to make this transition, I said to my partner Tim, I'm like, why me? Like, like we don't live in the same city. Why? And he said it's honestly it's three things. It's one, last time we talked, I think I met him up at after a Longhorns game, and he said, you told me about raising capital for your software company and that you had closed 6 private placements. I was like, yeah. And he said, two, you also told me you were the CFO there and built out the whole back office. He said, those are skills we need for our firm. And so what I learned there is, like, I didn't tell him that stuff to try to create a job opportunity. It was just, we were talking, and that's so you don't ever underestimate the value of the skills that you are building and how transferable they are to other places. Then the third thing he said was, at the end of the day, I can trust you. I know who you are. I've known you for 5 or 6 years. I can trust you. And that was a big deal for me, because that was the first time like a relationship really created a true opportunity that I thought was, one of the big seminal opportunities. And I have a theory that you're going to have three opportunities that happen in your career to really make a difference. And one of them you're going to totally miss. Like you're sitting in your cube one day and Jeff Bezos comes by and says, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting an online bookstore. You want to go 50-50?" Nope, I'm good.
Never trust.
I'm working on this model.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. It's just going to fly over your head and you're going to miss it. And so, you're going to have two other, maybe it's four. I don't know what it is, but you don't know when they're going to come. And so you have to take every opportunity seriously and, and look into it and not be worried about all the reasons not to take this opportunity, but look at why that opportunity could be valuable for you. And for me, as I was looking at it, I was like, man, this fits with everything I want to do. I want to be in control of my own destiny. I want to have good partners. I want to go to work every day knowing that if I do a good job, I'm building something for future generations and also for future generations in my family. And so when all that came together, I took all the fear and all the reasons, and I'm, a relatively conservative person by nature, and I threw them out the window. And we always, and Dean, I'm sure you were like this too, right? You sold your house, but our joke was, we're going to give this our all, and we think we're going to be successful. But if we're not, we can always go and get a job. Like if the fallback is getting a job, that helps eliminate a lot of the fear and a lot of the things you worry about. And so I'm very glad that I did that. It wasn't without a lot of consternation. And as we watched the world implode during the GFC, and we had just started this firm, and we didn't make an investment for 23 months and just sat there, trying to figure out what to do. It was, it wasn't easy, but we never gave up, our original thought of why we got into this, because we thought we could do it better than other people were doing in the space.
So I want to get into Pennybacker, but before we get there, there is another point that I want to pull out, which is there's some freedom and courage that comes from just having parents who are entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
And that kind of is built in you, where if you're a first generation student, the answer is typically get a job, keep a job, and don't leave.
Mhm.
Right. And so it's so important for first generation students to hear a story like Mike's, but also have a Mike in your team, on your team, right? Mike, when we talked about how when you're making these big decisions, you have a group of friends that you go to. Talk a little bit about that, because that also helps you to frame your thinking. Because if I have only a group of first generation friends in my circle, there's a thought process that we may not go into. Having a Mike on your team is so important. Mike, can you just expound on that a little bit?
Absolutely. Growing up, if I wanted advice about business or my career, I went to my dad. My dad was very entrepreneurial, always had ideas, was willing to embrace risk, and certainly took a lot of risk. I lost my dad when I was about 40, and but when I was, as I started really, as I got into my mid 30s, there's a group of guys that I went to undergrad with that I stayed in close contact with. And one great thing about the invention of the iPhone is you can text all the time. And so I went from talking to these people maybe once a week to 5 times a day. Right? You build relationships, you expand relationships that were built when you were 18. And over time, I kind of, I like to say, I created my own personal board of directors, people that I could go to that would tell me the truth, and that I could also share things that maybe you wouldn't normally share, with the guy that you like to go and knock back beers with, or and go on a golf trip with. And so I, I built these relationships, and really, as I contemplated major decisions, both when we started Pennybacker, later when I decided to pursue what I'm doing now at Notre Dame, I reached out to these guys and just said, "Man, you guys know me better than anybody. What am I missing? What am I overvaluing? What am I undervaluing?" I never asked them what they would do, but I'd always say, what do you think I ought to do? What would you do if you were me? And I always knew I was going to get the right answer, or at least the truthful answer for them. And sometimes the answer is not what you want to hear. Like, are you an idiot? Why would you go and do that? But it was massively valuable to cultivate those relationships from the beginning and grow, and naturally have them be advantageous as I made career transitions. And I think, B, as you were talking about first generation students, I agree with your point. I also find that so many of the entrepreneurs in America were not born in America. And like there, I would have no idea how to go to a different country and start a business. But if you go, I go to New York City, half the people that I see that own businesses are not, weren't born in this country. They're the biggest risk takers. And so a lot of these first generation students, they might be first generation students, but they're in their family or in their sphere of friends, a lot of people have taken this risk, maybe without a college degree, which I would argue is a heck of a lot tougher. And those are resources that, I mean, they didn't have a safety net. Like, and they couldn't just go get a job. If this doesn't work, it can be really difficult. And so I think everyone needs to kind of take, a little bit of stock of what's my network, what are my relationships, and not be scared to reach out to people. If people care about you, they will give you your time and they'll give you their true opinion. And that can be so valuable and help you uncover ideas or thoughts that you didn't even know, you didn't even think about on your own.
Yeah,
Mike, I
such a
think
great
that's
point.
such a good point because I think of folks that come over to the U.S. They are the ultimate entrepreneurs in a lot of ways. They've had to oftentimes take a leap, so you have to give up a lot of what you have, right? And you're risking that for a brighter future. You're going to have to work really hard at it and face the unknowns. And I think one of the things that through the Coffee Connectors program we try to bring out is, look, you have a lot of skill. You may not have necessarily grown up with a lot of insight into investment management, but you have a lot of skills that you're bringing to the table and a lot of experience that will help you, which I think is a good transition to Pennybacker because you and Tim built an incredible company over the years, and you've been CFO, you've been COO, you've been Chief Compliance Officer. I think I saw on your
Yep.
piece. I think you've held every position other than maybe somebody sitting at the front desk, but all the leadership roles certainly, and would be curious just to hear how you navigate it and how you built such a successful company. And I think you started to touch upon, which I think is interesting, is it doesn't all have to come at once. When you put yourself into these positions, you can grow within an organization.
But Mike, I want you to start with the investment story. That it has to start there. The fact that you started in the investment side of it, and then you didn't love it.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
such an important part of this story.
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the fact that I have waited for plenty of packages at the front desk too, when you're waiting for loan. So I think
Yeah,
I've done that role too.
good.
Um, but yeah, as Tim assembled our partnership, he ultimately went to and attracted some great partners. Vince Reyna was one of my partners, George P. Bush, Thomas Byer, and myself. And so he put together a team of people that believed that the firm was bigger than any one person, and that together we can become, we can work together, and let's not worry about how big our piece of the pie is. Let's worry about how big the pie is, and then we'll be successful in everything. And that's not just financially; that's everything that you do. And so I was in. I was. We had a great team. Tim put together a great team, and so day one I came in and immediately I wanted to be an acquisitions guy because everyone wants to be an acquisitions guy. So I was covering. We were really focused on a much smaller geography, and I really covered Houston, Texas, which is actually third largest city in America. I was going there every week, looking at deals, apartments, retail, office, and it wasn't until about 4 months in I realized I'm really not a good acquisitions guy. I don't like going to look at 100 deals to maybe submit an LOI on one that has a small chance to get through, and then if it does get through, I actually have to go to my investment committee, and it wasn't interesting, that part of it, that going out. I told B I'd go to properties and they'd always say, well, you probably want to see the roof. We'd go up on the roof. I didn't know what I was looking at, and so
Yeah.
quickly realized that I was not I was not a good investment sourcing guy. I always liked being on the investment committee because I think I bring a perspective and I understand the financial element very well. But that wasn't the opportunity for me. And so, um, ultimately I said, well, look, I've been a CFO at that point for 8 years. I can be your CFO. I've got that part down. And, as you build an investment management firm, you know very well, Dean, you want to make sure that you've got everything on lockdown. You've got the right processes in place, the right redundancy, everything, and that was something I could bring right away, that I knew that would be valuable to our firm. And so I spent um, I kind of took over that position, and then after about a year, I just could I love being out in front of people, and I wanted to do the investor relations and capital formation. And honestly, that was so rewarding over my 15 years of being able to be a part of a team that builds an investment strategy, that decides on the geographies that you want to be in and where you want to play, designs, where we want to be. In our flagship funds were very much value add, touching on opportunistic, and then being able to go out to the LP community, whether it be a high net worth or a family office or an institution or a consultant, and share that. And, I never felt like I was ever selling. I was sharing something that I was passionate about, where we were investing our capital in, and where we said, I just viewed it as, hey, we're doing this. This is really neat. I think we're doing it a different way than anyone else. Love for you to be a part of it, if you're interested. And that to me was just so much fun. And then talking to the guys who did enjoy the acquisition side and getting the details, like, what are you guys seeing out there? Give me an example, of a broken capital structure or something that I can share, and bring the front lines to the boardroom effectively, as we go in and talk to a pension plan or endowment, and then all the while continue to build the firm and new processes, and build the team larger. We went from 5 people to 12 people to 25, and then overnight it felt like we were at our current size of 62 people. And all the while, we are able to expand our geography and our strategies, and build off of what worked, and then expand that into whether it be a new vertical or a new strategy. That to me was just so fulfilling. It was also, and I know you feel like this, Dean, I always thought I kind of worked 3 jobs: COO, CFO, and capital formation. 15 years times three, it felt like 45 years, because you are doing 3 jobs, and you're hitting it hard because
Yeah.
as you start a firm. And we had great limited partners behind us. We had a couple of family offices that came in and supported us as you know we started our firm during the GFC. We ran through so much of our capital, but we knew that the opportunity was going to be there. And Tim and I had bankruptcy restructuring experience. George was a lawyer and Vince was a lender. It's like post financial crisis is like what we were made for. And so
Right.
we just had to get there. And once we got there and we had great partners who helped us get it there, then we were able to kind of showcase what made us different and buy, deeds in lieu of foreclosure, or buy at the courthouse steps, or, we did some pretty esoteric methodologies to get to the assets and achieve real value. And then you just can't help but be excited. And that's fun to share with people and say, this is, and the part that I loved is, I mean, our industry is regulated. It's certainly regulated, and we became SEC registered. That's where the chief compliance officer part came. But the only limits that you have on yourself as an investment management firm, as far as strategy, is your own imagination and the ability to
Hmm.
raise capital to pursue that and then execute on it. That to me was just wildly exciting. So I felt like we could be an entrepreneur over again every time we entered a new cycle or
Right.
looked at a different, geography or a different spot to be in the capital stack. It's like, hey, we get to do this all over again and figure it out and go through that learning process.
Mike, it's such a great story because you really had to look internally to decide like this acquisitions job, it's not for me. And then you soared and then you did amazing. And so that's a story I do want students to take away is if you're doing something and look internally, make sure it's working for you. But you're talking about Pennybacker, and even right now with such passion. So it's just a surprise when they say, "Oh, he's not even there anymore."
Yeah.
Can you go into that piece of the story and in the last few minutes just like explain where that transition again, Mike in his transitions, how did this happen and what are you doing right now and how did you get here?
Yeah. So, for as we built the firm, it was head down, go forward, lock arms with your partners and your limited partners, and it was so much fun doing that. And we continued to grow and grow the firm. Um, the and then uh, Ward Fitzgerald, the founder of Exeter, which became EQT Exeter, he's a graduate of Notre Dame in 2016, and this actually started a couple of years before. um, Ward and several others thought it was weird that we didn't have a real estate program at Notre Dame. We have all these folks that graduate from the university that are in real estate, but we don't actually have a program. And so in 2016, Ward made the initial gift to start the Fitzgerald Institute for Real Estate, and that was a big deal. But it was a gift with no infrastructure at all, like zero. And so they started building up the infrastructure. They hired a director, and in 2019, that director called me and said, um, Mike, I got your name from the gentleman at the endowment who runs real estate at Notre Dame's endowment, who I had pitched to 9 times and he never invested with us. He's like, he gave me your name. I'm like, uh-oh. And he said, would you be willing to be on our advisory board? He had a lot of respect for what you've done and how you did it. And I said, oh man, yeah, I would love to be on the advisory board. I heard about this gift. I know we're starting an institute, but I also said, but let's not just teach kids how to do Excel and Argus and, deem them real estate, ready. We need to teach them the whole constructs of the industry. I'm in private equity. And so at some point, someone had to leave another job to start a firm and then come up with a strategy, actually finance it, attract a team, go out, pitch it to LPs. If they were so lucky to get an LP, there's probably a side letter that comes. You got to negotiate an LPA all the way through. Like we need to teach them those constructs because I noticed in my career, we would hire the best and brightest who had the amazing technical skills, but they didn't really understand the construct that they were in. And it's like, hey, we have a term limit of, how long our fund life is. We have different restrictions on the types of assets we can buy or, the concentration limits, things like that. If we can teach them that in undergrad, they can be much more productive in their first year. And the director said, wow, that sounds like a whole class. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's easily a full class. And he's like, well, who would teach it? And I remember I was sitting in a parking lot outside of my optometrist's office, and I'm like, well, I'll teach it. And he's like, oh, you live in Texas. And I'm like, if you give me the chance, I will teach it. And so um, I spent the whole summer of COVID. At night, I was like, okay, I got to create a curriculum, and I just forced myself to do this all summer. And then I started traveling from Austin up to South Bend, Indiana, every Tuesday morning. I would teach Tuesday afternoon. I'd work for Pennybacker all day Wednesday and all day Thursday. I'd teach Thursday afternoon, then I'd get on a flight back and be in the office, early on Friday. And I did that for about 2.5 years. But it was probably in the third semester. It was kind of funny. It wasn't only my partners; it was people who worked for me. They're like, "Man, something's changed about you. You're a lot happier. Like what's going on?" I and what was going on is I really enjoyed the opportunity to work with young students who were highly motivated. Um, haven't been poisoned by corporate bureaucracy or culture, and have goals. And the folks watching this podcast that had dreams that they wanted to do, that they wanted to pursue. And so and then fast forward about another 6 months, I went to my partner Tim and I was like, hey man, I've always said I was going to have a second career. My I mentioned earlier, my dad died at a relatively young age. He had a very short retirement. And I said, if I have the chance, I want to make sure I use some of my productive years in doing something totally different that I think is, fulfilling in more ways than just on the investment side. And so I said, I think I want to teach full time and go back and do this. And Tim's like, yeah, I knew this was coming. I saw that 2 years ago. But as good partners, we always said at Pennybacker, our goal is to help each other reach our personal and professional goals. And if you forgot that, we had it written on the wall because that was the most important thing. That's why we're in business, certainly to serve our LPs, but as partners, that's what we want to help each other do. And so, they said, yep, you got to do this. You got to do this. And so spent the next 2 years on hiring people to take over my roles and, exiting the company as a full timer. I still consult back. And then I got the opportunity to come be a full-time professor at Notre Dame and then to lead the program. So I'm our executive director, which allows me to interface with the industry, talk to them, tell them about the types and quality of students that we're graduating, and then also work with our 3,500 alumni who all are interested in this. And if they want to help support the program so we can grow bigger, that's a big part of my role as well. Is making sure that we have a lot of needs and big goals, but we're building, what we believe will be the preeminent real estate program in the country.
That's great, Mike. And we'll leave on the podcast. We have a bunch of links that we put, but information about the program, what Notre Dame is doing, anything that you have that you think will be helpful, because we definitely want to put that out there for students and for high school students also that are listening that may be interested in Notre Dame. We're running out of time here on the clock, so we typically end with what I call the hot tub time machine question after the Silly's 80s movie. But the question is really, if you were to go back in time to your young college student self and you were to give yourself one piece of advice, having lived this extraordinary career and life that you have, what would you want to tell yourself?
Oh man, that's a good question, Dean. I'm actually going to give two pieces of advice. One, which I just gave a student about a half hour before we tape this podcast. You will never be in an environment like you are as an undergrad again. Surrounded by amazing people, all who have a common. You've got something in common with them, and there's kind of a brotherhood and a sisterhood. Invest in those people. Get to know those people and build relationships. And I don't care if they're at if they're in a rival dorm or, they're your nemesis for some other reason. The power in my career and in most of our careers, if we look back, is the ability to build relationships. And it's amazing where relationships can take you, both personally and professionally. So invest in getting to know as many people as you can, that you're already, you already have so much in common. That is really powerful, particularly a school like Notre Dame, where students go all over the country. When they graduate, they certainly don't stay in Indiana for the most part. That's first and foremost. And then the second thing is see the big picture as early as you can. Oftentimes when I was an analyst first year out, my goal was to get that spreadsheet done so that I could get out of there by 6 o'clock and, whatever it was that I wanted to do that night. And I didn't really look at the big picture. Why am I doing this work? What are we trying to do and accomplish with that? Had I picked my head up out of the model and, kind of into the real world earlier, I think I would have done some things differently by seeing the bigger picture, and how are these guys actually making money off of this transaction? That wasn't, I was just trying to get the model done. And so, if you can build relationships and see the big picture, the technical skills are fine. You're going to be fine with that. But those are things that sometimes it takes a little reminding that those are the things that ultimately will help elevate you to new opportunities.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mike. This is great. Yeah. Great conversation.
And the students are going to love it. Everything that you talked about, so many lessons, and we're excited to put this out here for the students to learn.
Awesome. Guys, this has been a ton of fun. I love this. This is why I'm here. I love these conversations, and I love when I talk to students, I tell them every which way I've screwed up, and I'm very open about it. Yeah. Because one, I want them to know that failure is okay. And the second thing I want them to know is, look, you're not alone. Like you got to get out there and you got to put yourself, you got to take risks to ultimately get where you want to go. And to that point, if there's any students that you want to introduce me to, or that you think would like to talk, just let me know. I'm happy to make time. I really enjoy that part of what I get to do now. And so, I want to be a resource to the Coffee Connectors in a more than just today.
Mike said it himself, students. So if you want to talk to Mike, reach out and we'll put you in touch with him. Mike, thank you so much again. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Dean.
Thank you for listening to How I Got My Job, a podcast from Coffee Connectors.
Coffee Connectors helps connect first-gen college students with a whole new level of opportunity in commercial real estate.
To learn more, visit coffeeconnectors.com.
We would love to connect with you.